Hey there everyone, Ramesh here back again with another video. In this video we will talk about the latest version of Spring Security and Spring Boot. Well, we will create Spring Boot 3 application and we will see how to use Spring Security 6 in a Spring Boot 3 application. Well, there are a lot of developers are struggling to use the latest version of Spring Security in a Spring Boot 3 application, and in this video I am going to demonstrate how to use the latest API that is provided by Spring Security in a Spring Boot 3 application, because Spring Security deprecated a lot of APIs and classes. Alright, and here I have listed the popular ones like Spring Security Deprecated, Web Security Configure Adapter, Enable Global Method Security Annotation, Ant Matchers, and Authorize Request. So these are the popular APIs and classes the Spring Security has deprecated in latest version. So in this video I am going to show you how to replace these deprecated APIs and classes and how effectively you can use Spring Security 6 in a Spring Boot 3 application. Alright, so Spring Security is a framework that provides authentication, authorization, and protection against common attacks. With a first-class support for securing both web and React applications, Spring Security becomes a de facto standard for securing Spring-based applications. And Spring Boot provides Spring Boot Starter Security dependency that aggregates all the Spring Security related dependencies together. We don't have to manually add all the Spring related dependencies. So Spring Boot provides one single dependency, that is Spring Boot Starter Security dependency. So by using this only one starter dependency, we will get all the Spring Security related dependencies, and also this starter dependency will manage the versions of all the security dependencies. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's create one Spring Boot 3 application and let's see how to use Spring Security 6. Let's go to browser and let's use Spring Initializer to quickly create a Spring based application. So here in a new tab, just type start.spring.io. This will bring up Spring Initializer, and we are going to use Maven. So let's select project type Maven over here, and here let's keep JVM language Java, and we are going to use Spring Boot version 3. So let's keep Spring Boot 3 as selected over here, and here let's fill up the project metadata. So let's give group as net.javaguides. You can give any group that you want. Let's give artifact something like Spring Boot Security Tutorial, and the project name is same as artifact, and description let's give demo project for Spring Boot and Spring Security, and the package name net.javaguides.springboot, and then packaging jar and Java version 17. Well, remember, whenever you use Spring Boot 3, then make sure that you have to use Java 17 or later, because Spring Boot 3 requires minimum Java 17 version. Okay, next go to a dependency section over here, and here just type web. So we are going to build a couple of REST APIs. For that we are going to use Spring Web Starter dependency, and this dependency internally provides Apache Tomcat as a default embedded container so that we can quickly deploy our Spring Boot application. Next, let's use Spring Security dependency. So go ahead and choose this Spring Security dependency. Okay, to keep it simple, let's add these two dependencies as of now. Well, the main objective of this course is to showcase how we can effectively use Spring Boot 6 in a Spring Boot 3 application. Okay, next go ahead and click on generate to generate this project as a zip file. Next, let's open this zip file in a folder, and let's unzip this zip file, and next let me open the IntelliJ IDEA. Alright, and here we have a couple of options: new project, open, get from VCS. So we are going to open the existing project, click on open, and go to the location where your Spring Boot application is present. In my case it is in downloads folder, so let me select the project and let me click on open. So this will open Spring Boot project in a IntelliJ IDEA. Alright, next let's go ahead and let's build a couple of REST APIs quickly. So here let me create one new package and let's call it as controller, and within a controller let me create a class. Let's call it as student controller. Alright, and then let me create one more package and let me call it as model, and within model let me create one class. Let's call it as student, and let me define few fields like private long ID, private string first name, and then private string last name. Okay, Perfect. Next, let's create getter setter methods. So here, right click, generate getter setter methods and choose all the methods. Click on OK. Okay, now we have created simple Java class, that is student class. Next, go to student controller, and here let's annotate this class with @rest controller annotation. Alright, and within this controller let's build couple of REST APIs. So here let's type the method public and let's give the return type list of type student, and let's give method name as students. Well, within our students method, let's create a list of students and let's return as a response of the REST API. So here, list of type student, and let's give object name students and then new array list. Alright, and here let me create few students quickly. Okay, next let's add these two students to students list. Students dot add student1 and then students dot add student2. Perfect. Now we have created a list of students. Next, return students. Now we have created a method. Let's make this method as a REST API by using Spring annotation. So let's use @getMapping annotation and then let's pass the URL /students. Alright, so here we use @getMapping annotation to map incoming HTTP GET request with this particular method. Next, let me create one more REST API. So just type public and then let's give return type of the method student, and let's give method name something like create student. Alright, and let's pass student as a parameter to this method. Perfect. And within this students method we have created a list, right? So here what I will do, I will make it as a global. So let me cut and private and paste it over here. Next, let's call students within this create student method and then add and then student. Perfect. Next, return student. Perfect. Next, let's make this method as a REST API by using @postmapping annotation, and let's pass the URL /students, and then let's use one more annotation here, that is @request body annotation, to convert a JSON into a Java object. Now we have created a couple of REST APIs. Next, let's go ahead and let's explore Spring security. Well, if you go to pom.xml file, we have added Spring boot security starter dependency. Well, this Spring Boot starter security dependency internally provides all the Spring security related dependencies. For example, if you go to Spring Boot starter security dependency, if you can notice here, this dependency internally provides Spring security config, Spring AOP and Spring security web. Okay, it means we have to add only one starter dependency. It internally provides, it internally gathers all the Spring related dependencies, and also it manages the Spring security dependency version as well. For example, if you can notice here, we are using Spring Security 6. Okay, so this is awesome, right? So Spring Boot provides a single starter dependency. It will internally provides all the Spring security related dependencies, and also it will internally manage the version of all the Spring security related dependencies. Okay, great. Next, let's go ahead and let's explore more about Spring security. Well, whenever we add a Spring Boot starter security dependency in our Spring Boot application, then Spring Boot will automatically configure a lot of stuff for Spring security. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's explore how Spring Boot provides auto configuration for Spring security. Let's take a look into some of the important points about Spring Boot auto configuration for Spring security. Well, Spring Boot provides Spring Boot starter security starter dependency. This dependency aggregates all the Spring security related dependencies together. Well, this point we have already seen. If you go to project and go to pom.xml file, we have added Spring Boot starter security dependency. So this dependency internally gather all the Spring security related dependencies. Okay. Next, Spring Boot auto configuration enables Spring security's default configuration. So Spring security default configuration creates Spring security filter chain object, and it provides a default login form. Well, we will see how Spring Security's default configuration provides default login form a bit later. Next, Spring Boot auto configuration provides a default user with a username as user and randomly generated password that is logged to console. Okay, so Spring Boot automatically provides one default user just to check the Spring Security's default configuration. Okay, next, Spring Boot provides a couple of properties to customize the default user's username and password. Well, by default, Spring Boot provides a user with a username as user and randomly generated password, but we can customize the username and password of this default user by using Spring Boot provided properties. This we will see a bit later. Next, Spring Security by default protects the password storage with bcrypt algorithm, and Spring Security default configuration also provides a default logout feature, and it also enables CSRF attack prevention. And whenever we add a Spring Security dependency in our project, then Spring Boot automatically secures all the HTTP endpoints with basic authentication. Okay, now let's go and let's see all these points in action. Okay, so let's go to our project. Okay, and here we have added only one Spring Security dependency. We haven't configured any Spring security related configuration in our Spring Boot application. We have added only one dependency. Okay, now let's run our Spring Boot application and let's see how Spring Boot provides auto configuration for Spring Security. Well, if you can notice here in a console the randomly generated password. Okay, so Spring Boot automatically provides one default user to test Spring Security's default login and logout functionality. Alright, so let's use Spring Security provided default user to log into our application. So let's go to browser and here just access localhost 8080 and hit enter, and there we go. Notice here Spring Security's default configuration automatically provides out of the box login form for us, so that we can simply use this default login form to test the Spring Security's default configuration. Alright, so here let's log in with Spring Security provided default user. So the username is user and the password is randomly generated password. So let's go to console, and if you can notice here in a console log, this is the randomly generated password. So let me copy this and paste it over here and click on sign in, and here you can see the pop-up. So this is basically a basic authentication. Well, remember Spring Security 6 enables both form-based authentication as well as HTTP basic authentication. Okay, now we have logged in using form-based authentication. Next we can log in with basic authentication. So in case of basic authentication, we need to pass username and password in header of each and every request. Next, let's provide username as user and password as randomly generated password. Perfect. So this will give error because we haven't called any API here. So let's call students API, and there we go. You can able to see we got the response for this students API. Okay, and if you can just type localhost 8080/logout, this we will provide the default logout feature as well. Okay, go ahead and click on logout button. So this will log out from the application. So this is how Spring Security by default provides out of the box login form and logout functionality. Well, if you can notice the points over here, Spring Boot automatically enables Spring Security's default configuration, and Spring Security provides a default login form for us, and Spring Boot automatically provides one default user with the username as user and randomly generated password. So these points we have seen. Next we'll see how to customize the default username and password by using Spring Boot provided properties. Well, let's go to our project. Alright, and here go to application.properties file, and let's use Spring Boot provided properties to standardize the default username and password. So here just type spring.security.user.name equal to Ramesh, and then let's also configure the password spring.security.user.password equal to Ramesh, and let's also configure the role as well, spring.security.user.roles, let's say admin. Perfect. Now we have customized the default username and password by using these properties. Next, let me save this file and let me stop and rerun our Spring Boot application, and let's see whether these credentials work or not. Now our Spring Boot application is up and running. Let's go to browser, and here let me access the login page. So this is the default login form. So let's use the username Ramesh and password Ramesh and click on sign in, and let's also enter the username Ramesh, password Ramesh. Alright, perfect. And now we got 404. So let's type /students to access the REST API, and there we go. Okay, it means that we have successfully used these properties to customize the default username and password. Earlier the default username is user and randomly generated password. Okay, and if you can notice the console logs over here, as soon as we configure these properties, there is no randomly generated password printed in a console. Okay, because we have manually specified the password for this user. So this is how we can standardize the default username and password by using these properties. Okay, well, Spring Security provides form-based authentication as well as HTTP basic authentication, and in Spring Security 6 by default Spring Security form-based login is enabled. And if you go to basic authentication in Spring Security 6 by default Spring Security's HTTP basic authentication support is enabled. It means in Spring Security 6 both form-based authentication as well as HTTP basic authentication. Okay, so both authentications are by default enabled. Okay, so in order to use one of the authentication, we have to configure the Spring Security manually. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's see how to configure Spring Security manually so that we can use HTTP basic authentication. So let's go to our project, and here let me create one config package, and within this config package let me create one class, and let's give class name as security config. Perfect. Next, let's go ahead and let's annotate this class with add configuration annotation. Well, once we annotate this class with add configuration annotation, then this class becomes a Java based configuration, and we can define all the Spring Bean definitions within this class. Okay, perfect. Well, earlier we were extending our Spring configuration class from web security configure adapter, right? Now the web security configure adapter class is deprecated and it is removed from the Spring Security 6. If you try to extend web security configure adapter over here, you can see there is no web security configure adapter class. It is deprecated, and in Spring Security it is removed. Alright, next within this class let's create a security filter chain bean. Well, this security filter chain bean enables component based Spring Security. Earlier we were using the old style, like we are extending our class from web security configure adapter. Now we are using security filter chain bean to enable component based Spring Security style. Okay, so here let's give method name as security filter chain, and then let's pass HTTP security as instance. So let's give instance name HTTP, and let's go ahead and let's annotate this method with @bin annotation, and here let's have a return statement, and then let's call HTTP object, and it has a build method. Well, if you can notice here, build method returns default security filter chain class. Well, security filter chain is a interface and default security filter chain is a implementation class. So let's call this build method, and here is a compilation error. It says unhandled exception. So go ahead and click on this add exception to method signature link. So this will add a exception as a method signature. Okay, next within this security filter chain method we are going to write a Spring Security configuration such a way that we will enable only basic authentication. Okay, so here is an important logic HTTP, and then it has a CSRF method. So we are not going to use CSRF, so let's disable it. Just call disable, and then here let's call authorize HTTP request. Well, notice here authorize request method is deprecated. Okay, and Spring 6 onwards we have to use authorize HTTP request. So this method we use to authorize the incoming HTTP request to our application. Alright, and this authorize HTTP request takes an implementation of lambda expression. So let's pass a lambda expression implementation to this method. So here let's have a parameter that is authorize object, and then let's put the lambda symbol over here, and then let's call authorize object, and then it has any request, and then authenticated. Well, here we are using any request method because we have to authenticate any kind of request, and next authenticated, it means we are going to authenticate all the kind of request. Okay, next here remove the semicolon and just call HTTP basic. Well, if you can notice here, there are two overloaded HTTP basic methods. Okay, and we are going to use the first one. It takes the parameter, so go ahead and call HTTP basic and then just pass with defaults. So just call this customizer dot with defaults. Okay, now we have enabled only HTTP basic authentication by using this configuration. Alright, perfect. Next, let's run our Spring Boot application and let's explore HTTP basic authentication. So here, let me stop and rerun our Spring Boot application. And notice here, our Spring Boot application is up and running. Next, let's go to browser and let's see how HTTP basic authentication works. So here in a browser, in a new tab, just type localhost 8080/students and hit enter. So if you can notice here, we have secured our REST APIs using basic authentication. We have to provide the username and password in a header of this request. So here just pass username as Ramesh, password as Ramesh, and click sign in, and there we go, we got the response of the REST API. Alright, next let's go to Postman REST client and let's explore more about HTTP basic authentication. So here I am in a Postman client, and here let's call the students API. So here let me enter the URL. So let me go to browser, copy this URL and paste it in a URL request and click on send button, and there we go, we got 401 unauthorized because we haven't passed the username and password in a header of this request. In case of HTTP basic authentication, we have to pass the username and password in header of each and every request. Okay, so in order to pass the username and password in a header of the request, go to authorize and here just choose basic auth type, and here just type the username Ramesh, password Ramesh. So this is the credential we are using, right? So if you go to project and if you go to application.properties file, we have configured the username as Ramesh, password as Ramesh. So these are the credentials we are using over here. Okay, next click on send button and there we go. Okay, we have entered the correct username and password, that's why we got the response of the REST API. Alright, next let's explore more about HTTP basic authentication. Now you might be wondering how the Postman client send the username and password in a header of the request. So let me explain that. So go to headers over here, and if you can notice here, key value pair. So key is authorized and value is some string. So if you can notice the basic, so basic meaning basic authentication, and here is a some string. So this string is basically a base 64 format string. Okay, so if you copy this base 64 base string, and if you go to browser and here just type base 64 decode online. So let's use online tool to decode this string and paste it over here and just click on decode, and notice here the username is Ramesh, password is Ramesh. Okay, it means that the Postman client basically convert the combination of username and password into a string, and then it will convert that string into base 64 base format, and then it will pass in a header by using authorization as a key and value as a basic followed by the base 64 formatted string. Okay, so this is how the HTTP basic authentication works. Alright, I hope you understood how to enable HTTP basic authentication and how to use HTTP basic authentication to secure the REST APIs. Next, let's go ahead and let's see how to secure the REST endpoint using in-memory authentication. Well, as of now we have used only one user. Now let's go and let's create a couple of users, and we'll store those users in an in-memory object that is provided by Spring Security. So go to security config class over here. Within this class we'll create a couple of users and then we'll store them in a Spring Security provided in-memory object. Well, here just type the method public, and let's give return type of the method as user details service, and let's give method name as user details service. Alright, and within this method let's create a couple of users. So here let's use user details, and then let's give the username Ramesh, and then let's use the user class from Spring Security package. It has a builder method, and let's use its APIs like username to provide the username. So let's give username as Ramesh, and then let's use password API to provide the password. Let's give password as Ramesh, and then let's use roles to provide the role. So let's give admin as a role, and let's call build method to build this user object. Okay, perfect. Next, let's create one more user. So here user details, let's give username admin, and then user dot builder dot username. Let's give username admin, and then dot password. Let's give password as admin, and then let's call roles, and let's give role as admin. Well, here for Ramesh user, let's give role as user, and for admin user, let's give role as admin. Okay, next let's call build method to build the object. Next, here let's return an instance of in-memory user details manager and just pass these two objects, Ramesh and admin. Okay, next let's annotate this method with @bin annotation. Okay, perfect. So basically the authentication manager component will use this user details service to get the username and password. Okay, next let's run our Spring Boot application and let us see whether these two users will work or not. Okay, let me start the Spring Boot application, and here you can see Spring Boot application is up and running. Let's go to Postgres client, and here let's call this students API, and in header you can see we have password Ramesh and password as a Ramesh. Well, if you go to our project in application.properties file, here we have configured the Ramesh user. So let me remove this because we have already configured Ramesh user and admin user in a in-memory object. So let me quickly stop and rerun our application. Perfect. Next, let's go to Postgres client, and here in a basic authentication, in header just pass Ramesh as a username, password as a Ramesh. Click on send button. Notice here the status 401 unauthorized. Well, let me see what is the issue. So go to console, and you can able to see here there is no password encoder mapped for the ID null. Well, if you can notice the password field over here, we have passed the plain text, right? But the plain text won't work in case of Spring Security. We have to encode the password. So in order to encode the password, let's use password encoder. So here let me quickly configure the Spring Bean for password encoder. So public and then static to create a single instance, and then password encoder, and then let's use password bycrypt password encoder. Okay, so let's have a return statement, and then new, and then bycrypt password encoder. Well, bycrypt password encoder internally uses bycrypt algorithm to encode the password. Next, let's go ahead and let's annotate this method with @bin annotation. Okay, now we have configured the Spring Bean for password encoder. Next, let's use password encoder to encode the password. So here go to password, and then let's use encode method to encode the password. Perfect. And similarly, let's here also use password encoder and then encode admin. Perfect. Next, let me stop and rerun our Spring Boot application. Perfect. Next, let's go to Postgres client, and now try to access this API, and there we go. The API got the response. Okay, and if you can notice here, we are passing the username as Ramesh, password as a Ramesh, and if you try to use admin, so this user should also work. Alright, it means that we have successfully configured a couple of user objects in memory, and we have successfully secured our REST APIs using in-memory authentication. Okay, next what we will do, we'll use a method level security. Well, earlier we were using the annotation called enable global method security annotation to provide the method level security, but this annotation is deprecated, and Spring Security 6 provides a new annotation, that is @enable method security annotation. Well, remember, Spring Security 6 onwards we have to use @enable method security annotation to provide a method level security. And next, if you go inside this annotation, if you can notice here, by default it enables pre-authorize, post-authorize, pre-filter and post-filter annotations. Okay, next let's go ahead and let's use pre-authorize annotation to provide the method level security. We'll go to student controller, and here let's provide access to this REST API only by the admin user. Let's go and let's annotate this create student method with @pre-authorized annotation, and let's configure the role has role and then within a single quote admin. Alright, so basically here admin user can only access this create student API. Other user, that is Ramesh user, has a role user, right? So Ramesh user can't able to access this REST API. Okay, so here basically we are providing method level security for the admin user. Alright, next let's go ahead and let's run our Spring Boot application and let's see how this method level security works. Next, go to Postman REST client, and here we are passing admin as a username, password as admin in a header of the REST API. Click on send button. So this should give a correct response. And now what we'll do, we'll call the create student REST API. So here just choose post HTTP method, and this is the request URL, and go to body raw and then JSON as a content type, and within the body let's create one JSON. Let's say ID 3 and then first name, let's give Tony, and then last name let's give Stark. Okay, and click on send button. And before that, notice here in a basic auth we are passing admin as a username and password as admin. Okay, so click on send button and there we go. Okay, admin user can able to access the create student REST API because we have provided only admin user access to create student REST API by using pre-authorized annotation. Next, if Ramesh user try to access this REST API, then Ramesh user will get the unauthorized error. For example, here let me pass Ramesh as a username, password as a Ramesh. I click on send button and there we go. 403 forbidden. It means only admin user has a access to create student REST API. Okay, and this Ramesh user has a role user. That's why Ramesh user don't have access to create student REST API. So this is how the method security works. Alright, so I hope you understood how to configure Spring security to use in-memory authentication. Alright, and how to use a method level security in a Spring Security 6. Alright, so these are the very important points you have to remember whenever you use Spring Security 6 in a Spring Boot 3 application. Well, if you want to learn more advanced things, then you can go ahead and check out my Udemy courses. So you can see all these my Udemy popular courses, and if you can notice the ratings over here. Alright, so if you want to learn more about building the microservices and building real-time REST APIs and testing Spring Boot applications and Apache Kafka, RabbitMQ, building web applications, okay, so you will learn a lot about Spring Boot, microservices, Kafka. Okay, so go ahead and check out my Udemy courses. I'm pretty sure that you will learn a lot of stuff. Alright, I hope this crash course or this video is helpful to you. Alright, great. I will see you in the next video.